And tonight we are talking about the new documentary Generation Zero. Now, the film suggests that our trade deficit played a large role in bringing about the financial crisis, and that if we don't fix that, we are in for a very rough ride.
We've lost 6.5 million jobs since December of 2007 and the onset of the recession.
In the past, we would lose some jobs during recessions. We'd get some of them back during booms. We've never had the kind of deindustrialization we've had over the last 10 years in American history. And that's simply been because your political leaders are looking out for the bankers, the Hollywood producers, and the high-tech community.
Where is the concern about the more than 30 million Americans who've lost their jobs or who cannot find full-time jobs to work?
Americans consume about 5% more than they produce, essentially by importing and borrowing from the rest of the world. It's why we had the big credit bubble. We now owe foreigners to pay for those goods about $7 trillion. At its low point, the stock market was only worth about $8 or $9 trillion.
The people who have traditionally represented the American workers, our congressmen, our senators, well, they're more interested in representing vested interest, Wall Street, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, more than $3 billion a year being spent on lobbying, 435 congressmen, 100 senators, and 1 president.
Unless we make things in America, we'll import more than we export to an enormous degree, have to borrow from the rest of the world, and eventually go bankrupt. Over and over again, we have signed bad deals. First with Japan, and now with China, where they export so much more to us than they import. If China maintains an undervalued currency to keep its products artificially cheap in the United States, from 2004 to 2008, the trade deficit averaged over $700 billion a year. We now owe the rest of the world $7 trillion. That's an enormous debt. The next time around, we'll owe foreigners enough money that they could simply buy up all the stock of all the publicly traded companies in America. They could buy out America.
And we're back with the producers of the film, Dave Bossie and Steve Bannon. You know, is it basically you're saying in this film, our government is bought and paid for? That the regulations we see coming out are directly corresponding to the amount of money that people are giving to these candidates. Is that what it is?
Absolutely, and I think that's why you've got this Tea Party movement. I think the Tea Party movement, that the American working man knows that we live under the consent of the governed. I think the governed are telling you that we do not have their consent. I think they're fed up with it.
Do you support free trade? Do you support protectionism?
I'm a free trader.
Free trade, but it's much more complicated than that. This is by far, I think, the hardest thing we're going to have to deal with. When we talk about the deficit and the debt and everything like that, we have deindustrialized this country. And the question is we've been free traders. Have we been gamed by mercantilist policies? It shouldn't be lost on us that the economies that are on fire in the world, China, India, Brazil, and East Asia, all our jobs have been shipped over there.
So here's the deal. If America puts any protectionist policies in place, first of all, the Chinese already are using the fact that they own all our debt, or a good percentage of our debt, as a weapon against us.
That is why people are shocked when they see this film, is that if you take the event horizon down the road, that is the jam that every day we're getting in deeper and deeper.
One of the most frightening things that I saw recently was when I saw that the Chinese military went out there and said, wait a minute, we're going to stop buying American debt. We're going to dump their bonds.
If they dump,
because we're supporting Taiwan.
That's right. As a foreign policy mechanism to force us into taking a different position, they literally could start the run on our economy.
Right, but I want to go back to this issue. I'll use the car company as an example, because it breaks my heart that people that I know, good people, you want to talk about an industrial area where we ought to be thriving. We created this. We own this. It was ours.
Exactly.
All right, but here comes the government, and they regulate safety, and they regulate emissions, and they regulate gas mileage, and they regulate.
Convergence of big labor, big government, and big capital destroyed.
Well, who's designing the cars? Washington or Detroit?
Exactly. This is by far the hardest part of this equation. This is why the stimulus bill hasn't worked. One of the reasons is that there's not an industrial jobs base out there that you can have working men and women can actually have a job that can support a family.
That's right. There's only so many ditches you can dig, roads you can build, bridges you can build. I mean, there's a lot of them that need work, but we need an industrial base. We used to, as you said, we used to build the automobiles, and we used to have the factories and the plants that used to provide for the world. Yeah. And now we have totally place that overseas.
You know, I know a guy that runs a coal company in Virginia. I don't know if he wants me to mention his name, but he wrote me a note the other day, and he's dealing with the regulatory side of the government all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a job creator. Right. He's an energy producer. Right. And meanwhile, his capacity to do his business, expand his business, compete on the open market, he's describing a nearly impossible situation for America to compete. Exactly. So is government hostile to capitalism? Is government now hostile to that imbalance that you're talking about?
I think that the industrial base, look, the things that have thrived, Silicon Valley, Hollywood, and the financial services are politically well connected. And they give huge campaign contributions, and they have air cover by government.
And the people that have
politically correct. The people that have not done that have suffered, and that's the industrial base. And we are not going to get ourselves out of here on a service-based economy. I think people that think that have not thought it through. They said you need a manufacturing base that can support the working men and women in this country.
Now, if we do not get back to that very core, we're going to be in for a long, long road here, and it's no upside to it in the near future.
Coming up, how our massive deficits are setting us up for a catastrophe and how future generations will pay.
And this idea that we're going to go borrow $9 trillion and run deficits of $1 trillion for the next 8 to 10 years is slowly being punctured, this idea. Well, fast forward, my friends, when we add another $9 trillion onto the $12 trillion we've already borrowed, we're going to have revolution.